Well, Kreg just announced what might be the first true Domino competitor, and after getting my grubby little hands on it, I have some thoughts.
The Wood Whisperer is sponsored by Woodcraft. Just get started.
Last week, my Wood Talk co-hosts and I were invited out by Woodcraft to their vendor sales conference. It was an incredible experience with lots of cool companies and products to look at, but the company that seemed to really steal the show was Kreg. On the first day of the show, they announced the new Kreg Edge. It's a Domino-style mortising machine that launches on September 1st. As they made the announcement at the show, they also went live online with some ads that really had the community buzzing. Of course, the phrase Domino Killer was immediately thrown around, including by me on my own social media post. And if you search YouTube for Domino Killer, you're going to find hundreds of videos with a wide range of products that did anything but kill the Domino. But because killing popular, expensive tools is really good for views, everyone is seemingly on a murder spree these days.
Why don't they love me?
After spending time with the new tool and talking with the folks at Kreg, I don't believe that this thing is a Domino killer at all, and I don't think that Kreg intends it to be. Instead, it's just a lower priced option for people that want a Domino-style joinery without the Domino-style price tag. A Festool Domino kit currently costs $13.59. The soon-to-be-released cordless version seems to be launching at $12.79. The Kreg Edge is hitting the market at $4.99. Well, if it works, it's going to be pretty compelling. So because I actually got to test drive this thing, I wanted to give you guys my first impressions and address your questions and comments that came in on my post. So let's do it. It's just a copy of the Domino. Yep, the Edge is essentially the same general format as the Domino. The bit spins and oscillates back and forth, and you push it into the wood to make a mortise. The accessories look very familiar, as do the bits in the pre-made tenons. The reality is, Festool really knocked it out of the park with the Domino design. Think about it. All of these other tool companies had 20 years to find a different way to do the same thing, but they couldn't or wouldn't. It only stands to reason that when the door finally opens, the smart companies are going to jump in and make some less expensive alternatives. So, did the Domino patent finally expire? Well, I'm no legal expert, but from what I understand, the key Domino patent expires this June. According to Kreg, they took a very careful approach to make sure that the Edge could move forward responsibly. And they say that it's not just a copy of what's already out there. They did add some improvements and filed their own patents to protect those innovations. So, what's different? Now, I can't comment on anything going on under the hood because I really have no idea. But I did note some more obvious changes. First, the addition of holes on the bottom for dust to escape. Unlike the Domino, you can actually run this thing without dust collection, and the chips just kind of fall on the floor. Kreg believes that most of their customers don't even have dust collection, so this was essential. If you do run dust collection, those holes supposedly allow for better airflow, though I obviously wasn't able to verify that. The fence on the Edge is a little bit wider than the Domino, giving more reference surface and support. Now, while that's generally a good thing, especially for people who are new to a tool like this, there are times when you need to get the tool into a tight space, and that larger base can actually work against you. Speaking of the fence, they added a nice micro adjustment knob, which I personally think is a huge bonus. And I really want that on my Domino. When I try to make small adjustments to the Domino, I usually have to assume a position that would be very embarrassing for other people to see in person, let alone in front of a few thousand of my closest friends. Speaking of fence height settings, the Edge comes stock with imperial measurements because screw you, metric people. Seriously though, lots of people in the US obviously prefer imperial, so that's probably a logical move for the US market. And if you do want metric, I would speculate that you might be able to swap that one out by just removing those two screws. And it probably won't be long before someone publishes a 3D print in metric. The tenon adjustments, however, are still in metric, mainly because the whole system is built on Festool's already established metric system. Of course, you probably also noticed that the Edge is battery powered. This is probably the most controversial thing about the Edge at this point because many folks do not want to jump on another battery platform. But I'm guessing at some point you'll be able to buy an adapter and you can get other brand batteries on there. I don't know much about that, but it seems like it should be possible. Oh, and who could forget the best feature of all, the onboard storage for the wrench. Now, show of hands from Domino owners, how many of you have lost that tiny wrench at some point? Yeah, me too. So onboard storage is a really nice addition and worth mentioning. Are the cutters and tenons interchangeable with Festool? Yes. Festool cutters and tenons should work on the Kreg Edge and vice versa. They're going to launch with the standard 5, 6, 8, and 10 millimeter sizes, so that means that Festool and Kreg cutters and tenons should all work interchangeably. The best part about that, though, is there's already a large third-party market out there for bits and tenons, so all of that should work with the Edge too. Will other companies make Domino competitors too? Well, I certainly don't have any privileged knowledge about this, but yeah, they'd be stupid not to. I have to imagine we're going to see offerings from the standard companies like Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, etc. This is no different than when the patents ran out on the oscillating multi-tool and the track saw in the late 2000s. So if you're on a different battery platform or you're just OCD about your tool colors matching, this might be one to sit out until we see what shakes out in the next couple of years. Will they make a corded version? Well, according to Kreg, there is no corded version in the works. They recently launched an entire platform of portable power tools, and they're committed to putting as much into that as possible, so it makes sense that they're launching this one exclusively as a battery-operated model. I know that's actually a big disappointment to some people, including yours truly, since most of us, again, are hesitant to get on another battery platform. But we just talked about some other competitors. My guess is at least one of them will come up with a corded alternative. Now, this is one of my favorite comments. No thanks, I'll keep my Domino. Yeah. Please keep your Domino. Kreg isn't trying to sneak into your shop at night and replace your Domino with an Edge. They're making a less expensive alternative, not trying to tempt you away from Festool, though I'm sure they would gladly take your business. Will this lower the price of the Domino? Not a chance. Festool track saw prices didn't drop when competitors entered the market. In fact, they just continued to rise. So if you want a cheaper Domino, look at the used market. Why is everyone making such a big deal about this? Well, look, there's no denying that the Festool Domino was a game changer. The loose mortise and tenon joint is really nothing new, but the speed at which you can make one with the Domino is undeniably awesome. And it's had so much impact that after 20 years, the average person watching videos on YouTube now sees any loose mortise and tenon joint and calls it a Domino joint. Another reason it's a big deal is obviously the huge price difference. The Domino is currently priced at $13.59 on Amazon. Do you realize that you can buy all of these tools, basically a starter wood shop, and still have 40 bucks left over to grab yourself some tacos and a nice ice cream on the way home? So you'll have to forgive some folks for seeing a Domino-like tool priced at $4.99 and getting excited. Also, keep in mind that with no competition, there's little motivation to innovate. Other than the new battery system, the Domino is largely unchanged in 20 years. I had to buy a second Domino recently for classes that I teach here at the shop. Comparing that to the original first generation Domino that I have, there's almost no way to tell them apart aside from the dust port. So maybe one downstream effect of all of this will be Festool making more updates and innovations to the Domino line. So even as a Domino owner, this could mean good things for the future. Is this bad news for Andy Klein's Trinity? Well, if you haven't heard, Andy Klein recently launched the pre-sale on his Domino killer called the Trinity. It's a drill-powered doweling system that actually creates 3 dowel holes at once. It looks fast, efficient, and seems to be built with premium materials. It also comes in at only $349. But the truth is, I haven't used the tool. And more importantly, Andy is a friend of mine. Our kids played together when I lived in Denver. We've done multiple business deals together. I'm really not the right person to provide an unbiased opinion about anything that Andy makes, but I support his efforts 100%. So my suggestion is you go watch his videos, and if you like what you see, pre-order one and try it out. Or just wait until the Trinity is released and someone does an unbiased review. Also, good luck finding an unbiased review. But I do think it's very important for me to disclose my personal biases when I have them. So this is one of those times. And finally, here are my first impressions after actually handling the tool. And so far from what I've seen, the only people talking about this tool are Kreg themselves and people who haven't even touched it. So hopefully I can offer something that's a little less speculative and mostly unbiased. Though please keep in mind, this is very much just a first impression. Now I made a total of 3 plunges with the Edge. I watched my buddies Matt and Shannon make a few as well. We also talked with the reps at Kreg for maybe a total of 30 minutes. Now that doesn't sound like much to go on, but keep in mind I'm coming at this with nearly 20 years of domino experience. Anything that feels different from the domino, I'm gonna notice pretty quickly. And honestly, that can work for or against me. My impression as an experienced domino user will be very different than someone coming at this with no domino experience at all. So with that said, in hand, the edge feels about as heavy as the domino. It's substantial and it doesn't feel cheap. I would say that it feels a little bit chunkier in hand, but not necessarily in a bad way. Where the domino is a little bit more smooth and rounded in places, the edge is a little more angular and maybe less refined. Keep in mind, this is purely aesthetics and it's my opinion, and we're also looking at a pre-production unit. Obviously, none of this impacts functionality. Now, when I first had the tool in hand, I tightened everything down and I gave it a good shake. You know, like a real scientific test. When I do that with the domino, I hear absolutely nothing. On the edge, I did hear a minor rattle. Now, of course, I didn't have time to investigate what it was, and it wasn't really consequential because it didn't seem to impact the performance in any way. Kreg did mention, again, that this is a pre-production unit, and their team is still refining the fit and finish, so maybe that'll change. In use, the fence felt solid, and the plunge action was smooth but slow. Now keep in mind, plunging fast with the domino is a great way to end up with oversized mortises, and they also probably won't line up with your marks. Slow and steady is the way to go, and I'm constantly reinforcing that with my students when they're using the domino for the first time. But this was slower than I was used to. I had to remind myself that this is a battery-powered tool. The regular corded domino runs at 25,000 RPM. The Kreg Edge on battery runs at 18,500 RPM. So that alone can help to explain why it feels less powerful. But the new Festool cordless domino also runs at 18,500 RPM. So until I have them side by side, it's hard to say if power or the feeling of power is going to be a factor and if those are going to feel exactly the same. So what about the tenon fit? I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the road here. The fit was pretty good on the edge grain cuts. On the end grain, it was a little bit looser than I like, but still, I think, acceptable. But here's the thing, I'm not really prepared to draw any definitive conclusions about the fit because there are just so many variables. Even with a Festool domino, if you move the domino up or down at all during the plunge or the retraction, you will end up with a loose mortise. If you live in a particularly dry climate, your tenons will shrink just a little bit and they'll always be just a little bit loose. And if you live in a high humidity environment like I do, you'll often have to remove your dominoes with pliers after doing a dry fit. Another factor that confuses the issue is the particular test setup that they had at the show. The bench was simply too high. My buddy Shannon is about 6'4", and I'd say even for him, this isn't the optimal setup. I'm 5'10", and for me, I felt like the edge was definitely higher than ideal. And my buddy Matt is 5'6", and the tool is nearly up in his armpit. When using the domino, lower is generally better, just because of the center of gravity and where you're applying pressure. You have two things to do with the domino. One is you have to hold down on the handle. That downward pressure is what stops everything from moving around. It stops you from lifting the back end, which can widen your mortise, and it just stabilizes everything. So the only job of this hand is to just kind of hold the back of the tool. And I usually don't push with my arm. It's not a motion like this with a saw. It's more plant it into my hip and then use my entire body to push forward. And this allows me to push forward and pull back without lifting. I can't tell you how many times a student of mine will push and plunge in just fine, but then on the way back, you kind of hear it go da-da-da-da, and that's telling you that the bit is contacting the wood on the way out and widening that mortise. So if you're up high like this, you just aren't going to have the same kind of strength, leverage, and positioning that you need to operate the tool optimally. So the only fair way for me to really judge the fit is to have the tool and materials here in my own shop with consistent test conditions and work tables that are set at the proper height for this kind of work. But in spite of the less than optimal setup, the joints were reasonably snug, which is why I think that bodes well for when you're working in optimal conditions. Now, time for some conclusions. Put simply, Kreg seems to have accomplished their goal, bringing loose mortise and tenon joinery to a much wider audience at a much lower price. While it certainly won't change the game for domino owners and those who are maybe a little Festool curious, it may open the door for a lot of woodworkers who were previously priced out of this category and had to use their routers to make mortises like a bunch of Neanderthals. So is this a domino killer? Nope. Kreg isn't trying to kill the domino. At $4.99, they obviously had to make significant changes that put this tool in a different class than a domino. Kreg fully expects that this tool will be in the hands of a weekend warrior that might make a few mortises one weekend and then throw the tool back on the shelf for a couple of weeks. This isn't meant for a production shop, and it's certainly not meant for people who are already well invested in the Festool ecosystem. In fact, they suspect that most folks who buy this tool will never even have touched a Domino before. And maybe we need to frame this more as a potential upgrade path for people who are using pocket screws, as opposed to folks who are already deep into the world of higher-end all-wood joinery. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more to chew on if you've been wondering what all the fuss is about. If you want to hear a little bit more about my thoughts on a tool, make sure you listen to the latest Wood Talk. That's our podcast that I do with Matt and Shannon. All three of us discuss our experiences with the Kreg Edge as well as our experiences at that awesome Woodcraft show. I'm going to put a link in the description for that. Now, I do intend to do a full review on the Edge and get one in my shop, put it through its paces, and tell you guys all about it. But until then, I hope that you found this first impression helpful. And I know you guys have opinions on this, so let's hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.